Alrighty, what's going on, y'all? We are live this morning. Extremely excited. I think I just yelled at it in the mic. I'm sorry about that, Emma.
Extremely live. What about me?
Yeah, I'm extremely live and extremely loud. So we have a guest today from across the pond, across the ocean. Emma Bostian. Emma, thank you so much for joining this morning. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it's not this morning for me. It's afternoon, so I'm all about it.
Yeah, Emma's wrapping up her day. We are just getting started, so I still have to have a few more cups of coffee. Emma is like ready to go to bed.
I'm on my third.
Wait, are you wrapping up yesterday for us or wrapping up tomorrow for us? I think you're wrapping up.
No, it's yesterday. The same day, dude. She doesn't live in Australia. It's the same day.
I'm just saying. Look, 4:30 in the afternoon versus 10:30 in the morning. That's different days, practically.
Practically. As we let the individuals trickle in, y'all, I know Emma would love to hear from you. Definitely have some viewers right now. Add us, comment us, let us know where you're tuning in from. I know Emma would love to hear from you. Emma, I want to ask you this because I think this is an incredibly important question, especially in Stockholm. What is your favorite coffee shop? Do you have a favorite coffee shop right now in Stockholm?
I do, and I can. I don't know if that pronunciation is correct.
Please, I would love for you to go ahead and try and just.
So there is a coffee shop. There are a couple here, but my favorite is called Lykke, and it means happiness in Danish. Okay. And my boyfriend and I, that was where we had our first date, and we sat there for hours and just talked. But the coffee itself is amazing. It's a cool venue, and I actually continue to order their espresso online to use with my new espresso machine.
Okay, I'm definitely going to get that name from you after this because I will also order. I love ordering coffee from around the world. That's kind of like my new hobby because I also drink a lot of it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in because we definitely have some viewers. And again, y'all keep adding us, commenting us to let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. So, Emma, for those of you who do not know you, which to be totally frank is probably very little because you have done a fantastic job at building brand and whatnot on the internets, give the individuals your background, who you are, what you do. And also, I want to preface this for people who are watching this. I know Emma's very passionate about this. Emma is not responsible for the roadmap of Spotify. So if you have any issues with the roadmap of Spotify, do not.
You can send them to my colleague. His name is Craig Spence. You can find him on Twitter.
I love that. Craig's just about
Why don't you go ahead and drop that handle? Go ahead and drop that handle. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Craig's about to get blasted. Emma, so go ahead, take it away.
So yeah, I am an American. I would say not expat because I never plan to leave Sweden. I am an immigrant to Sweden now. I just bought a house. I've been living in Europe for 3 years, but I was born and raised in upstate New York, went to college actually the same college that John Papa went to school, which is quite fun. So had a computer science degree. Then I moved down to Austin, Texas, worked there for a couple of years, working on IBM quantum computing, other fun projects, and then picked up and moved to Europe with my 2 cats, and I've never left. Yeah. And now I build the desktop and web player apps for Spotify alongside an incredible team of humans. And I do a lot in my spare time, like front-end masters, LinkedIn Learning. I write blog. I hate being bored. Can you tell?
Yeah. So, and also too, you have a wonderful podcast, which we've had a few of your individuals actually on we had Kelly Vaughn. On our pod.
I'm so sorry for you.
Listen,
he was so mean.
So bad. So bad. No. So yeah. So you also have Ladybug podcast as well. And then also what I wanted to go ahead and dive into today is decoding the technical interview. So if you want to give a quick overview about your ebook that you released,
so important.
Obviously I would love to hear kind of where that passion came out of.
Ooh, drop the link for us too so we can share that out.
Yeah, I will.
Ooh, okay, cool. So basically I had just accepted a job offer from Spotify. It was, oh my goodness, it was probably April of last year. And this was when the pandemic was really hitting the economy. And I realized many developers were losing their jobs. And I had just not only accepted the Spotify job offer, but I had passed my Google technical interviews and was like in the hiring committee phase and all of that. And I realized, holy crap, like if I had difficulty studying for these with a computer science degree, I can only imagine the anxiety other web developers are facing, because typically the only resources for learning data structures and algorithms are back-end focused, whether that's Python, Java. Like Cracking the Coding Interview is one of the most popular books, and it is written in Java. And so I was like, well, I have a ton of knowledge to share. And I asked the internet, I was like, would anyone be interested in like maybe a front-end focused version of like the technical interview process, but also not just the coding portions, but like the take-home project and the phone coding interview and the recruiter phone interview, and how to like navigate a job offer or process a rejection. And so that's kind of where this came from, is I wanted an all-encompassing resource that didn't currently exist, and that was front-end focused. So that's kind of where that came from. I wrote it in 30 days. I created it in light and dark theme, and yeah, it did really, really well. I have a blog post all about it. I was pretty transparent with the profits. I was able to pay off all of my medical debt that I'd had for years. And we pulled it off the market for like a solid 8 months or so, and we've just re-released it. I was working with the same team who produced Kent Dodd's React course, and they have helped me turn this into a fully fledged online ebook. And we've got plans to turn it into a fully fledged online course as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's go ahead and let's go over kind of some common things that you see, or should advise individuals who are, because right now the job market's crazy. We are in levels. Yeah, it's nuts. We are in levels that we've never seen. What's some advice that you have for individuals who are starting to look around for interviews for jobs? Give us kind of some baseline things that individuals should be mindful of.
I'd love to tap on the other side of that later too, about
I know we'll get there.
how to interview better. How do we make interview better?
Yes, we'll get there.
I have thoughts on that too.
Yes,
but
I know you would.
So I have different tips for different phases, right? So when you're job hunting, it's all about the resume. The resume is going to help you land an interview. Your portfolio will help you kind of not succeed in that interview, but portfolio and resumes are two different things that can kind of be the same, but typically you're going to submit. I'm losing my English the longer I live in Europe. You're going to submit a resume to a job application. And so having a resume that is well done is very important. I created an entire course with LinkedIn Learning on how to build a technical resume. It's not just for technical people. There are some technical things, but I even discuss like typography, color palette, things of that nature, and how to stand out to recruiters. So yeah, that's the first step. Once you actually land an interview, I think my biggest piece of advice, I have a few. Okay. So first, admit if you don't know something. That's like a huge red flag if a candidate cannot admit that they don't know the answer to something. No one wants to work with a know-it-all, especially if they know, like if you know you're wrong, admit it. Or like if you don't know the answer, just say that. It's fine. You need to do your research as well. So like if you're mass applying to jobs, they recommend keeping a spreadsheet of like your recruiter contact and details about the job. You need to make sure you understand what's going on in this role or the company, because they're going to ask you if you have any questions. And if you say no, that's kind of a red flag to them that maybe you didn't do your research. So have a few informed questions, and you can use the same questions for every interview. You can ask like, what are the opportunities for continued education? Like, do you offer online learning subscriptions? Do I have a conference budget? Things like that. You can ask about work-life balance. You can ask about remote work. Like, what does that look like in your company? How are you helping onboard remotely if it isn't a remote position? So have some questions. And I think the biggest thing is like learn how to problem solve effectively. So you will at some point encounter a question you have no idea how to answer. And that's just the nature of interviewing, unfortunately. But you need to understand how to move forward with that. And it's okay to ask for help. I think that's another important thing. If you're stuck, asking for help is totally okay. Your interviewer wants you to succeed, but you need to let them help you. And so understanding like, okay, I don't know how to start. You don't need to start with most optimized solution. It's actually better perhaps to start with, so let's say like you have a question that's asking you to find if an element exists or it's asking you to sort a list of integers in an array. And let's say that you don't know the most optimized solution, but you do know you can have a nested for loop that will compare every element against every other element and swap them if necessary. And that is bubble sort, right? We all know bubble sort. Well, maybe you don't, and that's okay. Bubble sort is a very inefficient algorithm.
I do not know bubble sort, but now I do. Thank you, Emma. This is the sole reason why you're on here today, because I actually want to know about bubble sort. So thank you.
Cool. So bubble sort is a very inefficient algorithm that is typically O of n squared, which means if you've got an array of 10 items, you're going to have to compare 10 squared items. So it's going to be is that 100? What is 10 squared? 100?
Yes.
I can't do math. Anyway.
I took pre-algebra in college, so your boy's out.
Yeah, it's like if you have 10 items in an array, you're going to have 100 different comparisons potentially, if you're not searching for something. So if you're sorting, it's going to be, 100 swaps. It can be. So you have to compare every item against every other item. And this is not efficient, but you know what? It's okay to say that and say, hey, I know this is not an optimal solution. I'll refactor it later and come back to it at a later time. And maybe something like merge sort, which is a divide and conquer algorithm, which uses logarithmic time. So don't feel like you have to start with the most optimal solution. It will trip you up, and that's not great for anyone involved. It's just stressful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: whiteboarding, pair programming, right?
It's great.
So what are your thoughts on all that, right? Because I get from a job seeker perspective, like, man, Taylor, like they can be whiteboarding, like, and I'm like, I feel like whiteboarding is like studying for the SAT. Like you can like kind of read books on it, but at the end of the day, like you can never really prepare for it. What are your thoughts on it? How should companies be mindful right now to interview? This kind of goes with I think where Jake wanted to go. How should companies be mindful right now in evaluating tech talent with things like whiteboarding, et cetera, et cetera?
Sorry, can you repeat the end of that question? Because my brain is not processing. And you know what? I'm simultaneously reading the chat, and people are mad.
You are, and it's very impressive. You're great.
People are mad that I didn't know what 10 squared is. And let me remind you, it's 5 p.m. I've been up since 6. I am on my third coffee.
Why is everybody hating Emma? Y'all be cool with Emma. Dadgum. She's trying to catch up on whiteboarding. Y'all hazing her about 10 squared.
I'm pretty sure that they're making fun of you, Taylor, because you also know
true.
I'm just going to say that. Yeah.
Emma's coming to my defense right now. Thank you, Emma. So whiteboarding, whiteboarding. What are your thoughts? Like, how can companies be mindful right now? And what are some interviews that you've seen that companies have done well to evaluate tech talent?
I think the biggest thing is to make it relevant to the job. So stop asking these brain teaser style questions just to see how candidates think. It's like you can ask relevant questions that still evaluate how they problem solve. So if you're not testing, because that's the wrong word. I always like to approach every interview as a conversation, and that's something we can get into later. It shouldn't be an exam. It should be a conversation. So stop expecting them to have APIs memorized. Don't expect them to know what the signature on a splice versus a slice method is on an array. Like, let them look those things up or give those to them, which is something that we do. Ask relevant questions. So if it's a web development job, you should be having a conversation about accessibility, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? But it's an artificial environment. At the end of the day, it's an artificial environment. You need to be aware that this is not accurately going to depict how someone is going to come into a team and work effectively.
Well, we did this, and I think I first wrote this blog post last year, but we talked a little bit more about this a few months ago about inclusive versus exclusive interview styles, right? Where there's the type of styles where I'm looking to see if this is someone that I want on my team to be able to collaborate with, and we can make each other better, and we can execute something great, build something great, versus I have this team and I'm going to defend it at all costs, and you prove to me why you should be here, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that mindset permeates through their culture, and you can kind of get that, if like, okay, do I even want to work on a team that has this, we're so exclusive that you prove why you want us to like you, or I want to work on a team that cares about me as a human, even through the interview process. And then you start having these conversations. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that as you approach an interview?
My thoughts on that is, if you treat candidates as like disposable things that write code, it's going to come back to haunt you in one way or the other. Like I interviewed with a company I had the best interview with them. It was like 2013 maybe. They were a startup. It was a really cool product that I still to this day use, but did not have a great. So anyway, I had a great interview with them. The recruiter was great. We kept in touch for several years, even after I had moved to Germany. And the next time that I was ready to interview with them, the guy joined the call. First of all, it's 6 a.m, okay, my time. And I did it because I was like, you know what? It's a big time difference. They were in Australia. It is what it is. And I get on this call and he starts hammering me with definition questions like, what's the difference between constant and let? And I gave the right answer, first of all, and he goes, that's not right. And I was like, okay. But at the same time, he goes, have we spoken before? And I'm like, what do you mean? We've been emailing for the past several years. You can at least read my file. And then he's getting pinged on Slack. But first of all, you should not be on Slack working when you're interviewing a candidate. And the guy was like, oh, sorry, like my teammate needs my help and I'm the only one who can help him. Can you wait a second? And he like made me sit there and wait. And then he just has this massive ego about like, we've grown so much and our profits are through the roof. And I'm like, you know what? This is the worst interview. And actually he came back to me and was like, so do you want to move forward in the process? And I said, no, absolutely no, I do not. And like, these are I told him why. I said, I did not have a good experience. So if you treat your candidates as if like they have to pass a test to come work with you and they should want to work with you, they're never going to recommend anyone go work there.
Yeah, because we hear, there's already hard enough to find people just in general that one, can do the job, two, that you like. But at least if you can start with some fundamentals and people you like, then hopefully you can take the time to coach people into your team and assimilate. And that forethought from this is getting better in a lot of companies, but is lagging in so many. About I can find someone to bring in that fills a personality void or something in our team that we can help coach to. Here's how we've done things and here's how we will continue to, and bring them up to speed, as opposed to, listen, you're going to come in here and we already know everything. You're welcome to work with us, which just sounds like what that person just did. It's just such a crappy experience all the way through. Culture starts the first interview.
I think it's important just to kind of like call out the fact that we shouldn't be looking for a specific type of person, because then you can get into some dangerous areas, right? Yes. With like tokenism and implicit bias and all of that. We want to avoid those things. But it's like, is this person eager to learn? Can they admit when they're wrong? Like those are the things that are more important to me than like, did you get the absolute right answer, most optimal solution? And I wish that more companies would see it like that.
Why do you think that companies don't? I have no, I do have some ideas, but like, why do you think it isn't a more common thing to just be open when it comes to interviewing? Like just in your career, I don't know if you've seen any consistencies there.
I think many interviewers are not trained in terms of what it means to be a great interviewer. So Spotify, we go through interview training, and really? We have to take an unconscious bias course. We have to be a shadow. So there are always two interviewers. There's a lead and a shadow, and we submit our feedback separately, and then we'll come back together and we'll evaluate how far off we were, so that we can recalibrate based off of like the rubric that we're using. So this helps avoid unconscious bias. But we do a lot to train our interviewers, and we are still currently to this day reevaluating the skills that we're testing and or the skills that we're evaluating and what's really important. So it has to be a cyclical, like never ending. It's evergreen. Like you always have to be prepared to alter your process, but you also need to train your interviewers. And I think this is where that mentality of like gatekeeping or bias comes into it. Is like people just aren't trained in interviewing in some companies, and it shows.
So let's give a crash course. Let's give a crash course real quick. Training Interviewers 101 by Emma. What are some like 3 things interviewers need to be mindful of? And then like for those of you who like want to stop watching, like you can after this, but please don't. But what are 3 things that individuals should be mindful of when they interview?
I think the first is that unconscious bias exists, and even if you're aware of it, it's going to trickle into your evaluation. And so actually I had this happen where I was a shadow, and I was talking to my interviewer after my co-interviewer, and I said, she seems like she would do great, or like she was basically mean, just like several years younger. And my co-interviewer said, you need to check that implicit bias, because what you're doing is identifying with this person, and you can't just want someone to succeed because they look like you. And I'm like, yes, this is true. And so you have to keep that like very, like, you need to recognize that you're going to have those thoughts, and that's it happens to everyone, but you need to be aware of it, and not recommend someone just because you see yourself in them to some aspect.
Sure.
The second thing I've noticed is to ask why a candidate has done something the way that they've done it. Because sometimes you learn things from them, and I think we need to be open to learning from them. Like today, I learned something new in an interview, and I was like, oh, cool, I didn't know this was a thing. But if someone does something, instead of just assuming that they don't know what they're doing, ask, hey, why did you do it this way? And then maybe it'll, allow them to see, oh, maybe there's a better solution. Or maybe it'll let you see, oh, okay, I understand why they did it that way. And it makes more sense. I guess the third is to approach it as a conversation instead of a test. I never expect candidates to memorize things. Like if they need like a random number generator for a problem, it's something that we can give to them, because those APIs or like the signatures and the methods can be a little bit tricky. So I think unblocking your candidates and allowing them to focus on the important pieces of the problem versus like the semantics of things is really important.
So good. That's so good. Just crush that. So how would you, so if you were in charge, that was so good, my brain's broken. If you were to create an interview process for yourself, so if I came to you like, Emma, listen, like we have a few organizations here in the US that are struggling with interviewing tech talent. I need your help. Can you come in and consult with me and build out an interviewing step-by-step process for companies? What would you suggest? Like, what are some key things that companies, maybe from a speed, from a content, from a who's interviewing, like how would you structure like a really good interview process?
So first of all, I just want to put this out there. Like, I'm not an expert on this stuff. This is just given my experience. This is what I would say. I think giving candidates a choice as to what they want to solve is the best thing to ever happen. So for example, instead of offering, here, let's give them a choice. Do they want to do a take-home coding project that'll last, a few hours, or do they want, and they do that on their own time in their own homes, or do they want to do a 1 hour not whiteboarding, but like conversation interview live with someone? Because I love coding projects. For me personally, at this time in my life, they work really well. They allow me to use the tools that I want at, in a more practical environment where I'm doing it like I'm developing as I normally would. On-site interviews for me are really stressful. I don't like going to a place for an hour and being quizzed on things. So I would say give the candidates an opportunity to choose whether they want to do a take-home project or if they want to do like an hour-long in-person pairing session. This is also going to help people who are parents, who are working more than one job, who have accessibility needs that we forget, because forcing someone to come in and do an in-person or a whiteboarding test, like we forget that some people, I was talking to this guy, his name is Steven. He is a quadriplegic and he uses a mouse stick to type. And he was saying that when he goes to do these coding sessions, it takes him longer to type because he's using mouse stick, and the people interviewing him were not prepared for this. And so giving candidates a choice as to what they're most comfortable with is going to be the best for everyone involved. And then I would say reduce the number of interviews. I mean, do we really need a 5-step interview process?
We don't. No, we don't.
We don't. Like, look, for example,
everybody has to. I feel like everybody needs to say, like, they want to exert their ego and they want to exert their knowledge. And so they're like, I got to speak to this person. It's like, bro, you don't. Yeah. You don't.
Like, do they really need to talk to your scrum master or your product manager? No. These are things that you can learn on the job. Like, in my personal opinion, that does not need to happen. I think look, if you're forcing them to do like a phone coding interview, do they really need to do the same type of interview again in an on-site interview? I don't think they do. Right.
Absolutely. So we've had a few questions come in. Jake, you go ahead and ask a question. I'll tee up a few questions. If anybody's watching, if anybody's watching, please ask questions. I will try to go through these.
Can I make one more quick point?
Yeah,
of course.
If you're going to require candidates to take time to interview, you should be paying them for the work if they're delivering. So like take home projects, for example, should be paid. And actually, when I interviewed with Gatsby, not only did they give me several, so it was like the phone screen technical interview. They gave me multiple. They said, here are 3 questions. Which one would you like to answer? Love that. That's great. Then the take-home practical portion of this was not only paid, but it was actually doing some of the work that you might see in the day. It wasn't the actual work, right? That would be unethical, but it was similar to what you would do. And so when I was doing that, I was like, you know what? I actually wouldn't like to be an open source maintainer. And I actually pulled out. But the fact that it would have been paid, it was wonderful.
Yeah,
we've done actually, if depending on where we're organized with something, we've actually done, hey, if you want to build this component, we're going to use it in a live project. We send NDAs through our interview process, and you'll get paid for that component, right? So it helps both, right? If we can get something either spun up for one of our MVPs or for a client, then we can also test someone and how they kind of work in with the team in this working interview that gets paid, right? But then for us, because we're not Spotify, right? You're not a huge company that has lots of money to be able to pay everyone for something. We still got some value, right? There's like the value they'd be able to value the time of the person interviewing where you want to pay them. But there's also the value for the fact of a small, medium business that can't always pay for it. But if you can use it and put it into your roadmap, then you can have it, have benefits on both sides and still be able to make it fair for that candidate.
Yep, I agree. So Ellie asked a question. You might share this in your book, but what was one time that you bombed? What did you learn? And then did you ever get a chance to win where you had once bombed? Thanks, Emma.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, of course, absolutely. I've totally bombed. I have actually gone to phone interviews and not known that they were going to ask me technical questions. I remember there was one. I was like, I was an intern at IBM, and I was... or maybe, I don't remember if I was an intern, if I was like full-time at the time, but I was interviewing internally, and the manager, I thought it was just like the manager chat, and it turned out to be a technical interview, and I was totally unprepared, and it was something about like a double-ended stack, and it was just like, I totally destroyed it, never heard back, and honestly, I was like mortified. But I've definitely early on in my career, when I was interviewing, I've had horrific like live coding interviews, and I've also pulled out of interviews where I knew my skills were not good, and I was not ready for a position. So I don't think that there should be shame in it, but unfortunately it's just kind of a byproduct of the artificial environment that sometimes you will feel shamed, and it's okay to feel those things because everyone does.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that same note, you mentioned a couple times there's been some processes that you've pulled out of.
Mm-hmm.
What is a good way to pull out of a process where you can maintain some sort of relationship if needed, or at least have like a good working?
What's funny? Later. I interviewed with Spotify a year before I accepted this offer, and I pulled out of this process. So actually, the biggest way to do it is say, hey, I really appreciate your time. I'm very interested in working together sometime in the future. Honesty is the best policy. So like for me, I've said before, my skills are not where they need to be to succeed in this role. And the recruiter said, absolutely no problem. I appreciate that. Like, do you want to keep in touch? And I said, yeah, let's chat in a year and see where I'm at. I've also said, because moving here, I had just moved to Germany, so I was not prepared to move to Stockholm, which is the biggest reason why I pulled out of Spotify the first time. And I said, hey, I'd love to stay in touch. I just moved to Germany. I'm really not ready to relocate internationally again, but let's keep in touch. That's the thing. Like, you need to thank them for the time that they've spent communicating with you, and then say, I'd love to stay in touch, or say, you know what, this role is not something that I'm actually interested in. But if you have something along these lines, I would love to talk about that. But I think the biggest thing is you're admitting to them that you don't want to waste their time. And I think that's the biggest, it's
self-awareness and humility is really, it
seems like there's some similarities through this whole entire interview between a self-awareness and humbleness. And it seems to be relatively consistent. So there's one question too from Faith. Faith has a good question. What would you say to someone who is new to programming and has a difficulty time with tech interviews? Like, what resource would you suggest to get better? Emma's book, one.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I wrote the guide I wish I'd had. So I don't want that to sound conceited, but like everything in there is everything I wish that I knew ahead of time. But that being said, my biggest piece of advice for that is it's very overwhelming to interview when you feel like you have so many areas to improve upon. But I think talk to the recruiters if you get to talk to a recruiter and ask what the interview process is going to be like, what skills they're going to test. Many will tell you what skills you need to study and focus on those, prioritize those. Yes, I am seeing a comment from Cyrus, and I want to address this with this question, which is it okay to ask for feedback? Yes, likely when you're starting out interviewing and even further along in your career, you're going to get rejected. Totally normal. It's part of the life cycle. It's always okay to ask for feedback. It's actually great to ask for feedback.
Yes.
Just be prepared for them to say, hey, we're legally not allowed to give you any. I've had that happen. It depends on the countries too, because some of them have different laws, but feedback is always great. And it can be hard to digest sometimes, but guess what? It's going to help you hone in on like the skills you need to improve.
So I've heard people to go back over. Oh, sorry. Yeah. On presentation from a technical interview, sometimes, I've heard some people that just are inclined to take the time that even if they're rejecting someone, and it's just so cool when a hiring manager does this and they're just like, all right, so here's why this was incorrect, or here's some new ways that you could look at, or maybe you should research, and just adding, I'm saying this to interviewers now, even spending those 5 or 10 extra minutes, especially with junior engineers coming up, is you could literally change the trajectory of someone's career and their life for that matter. So I know it's busy. I know you got a lot of stuff going on to get back to your thing, but like, do take the time if you can, at least to point them in the right direction.
That happened to me at Google. It's funny because Google has such a notoriously they're seen as such a difficult company. And yes, the interviews are difficult, but my recruiter was wonderful. She came back to me and told me in every single interview what they said and like what areas could be improved on. And said I think I interviewed 3 times with them. The second time I made it to the onsite, and she said, there are just a couple areas that you can improve on so that by the time you get to the hiring committee, it's an easy yes. She told me what those were and said, let's talk again in a year. And we did talk again in a year. And that was the time that I actually passed those. So, it's funny because Google has this reputation of being like a scary interview process. And it's scary because they're notoriously a difficult company to get a job at. But I found them to be very empathetic throughout the whole thing.
So, and I think too, so we've talked about this in past episodes with the Unicorn Finders. And again, thank you all. I just want to say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for everybody tuning in today. We really appreciate it. We've talked about how interviewing is branding for companies right now. The way companies treat interviewers is a direct reflection on not only culture, but also the company as a whole. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously we've been talking about this, but I mean, companies really need to be aware that from a marketing and branding perspective, their interview process and how they treat the candidates through the interview process is one of the key indicators of who they are as an organization. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely valid. I also think that you should have all different kinds of interviewers interviewing. So have interviewers from all different experience levels, from all different cultural backgrounds, from all different teams. Because like personally, I've only ever been interviewed by one woman in my entire time interviewing. And that, guess what, was at Spotify. And she's also my teammate now. So if you're trying to recruit the best talent is not homogenous. And the best talent is not going to come work for you if it seems like your company is not a place that they like see themselves. And so, yeah, absolutely. It is a representation of you as a whole. And if I had a bad interview at a company, you can be sure that I will not interview with them again. Like, that sounds bad, but
yeah, I mean, that's like for diversifying who's interviewing. There's some companies that believe so firmly in like, oh, this will make sense if we have the CEO of the company meet this person to impress them. And I don't know about you, but to me, that just shows to me that they can't make any decisions at an autonomous level within the teams. And it would mean that if I came in those team level, I also wouldn't be able to make any decisions. So you have to see the pros and cons of having everybody in there. And you're right. If you can bring in people that are more junior, that would be teammates and not just leadership, it just makes this transition so much smoother for someone jumping into that team. I love that. Love it.
Yeah. So this question I saw in the chat, and it's like a super great question, actually. It says, what would be a good answer to why are you leaving your current job? First of all, you never want to bash any previous employer to a potential new employer. They will not want to hire you. However, why are you leaving your current role? There are multiple reasons. One could be I've worked at startups my whole career. I want to find a larger company to branch out and maybe see what that's like. Or, I'm looking to expand my skills into like a new product area or to a new part of the stack. And I feel I can do that here. Those are the kinds of answers you're going to want to give. Is all about like, hey, I feel like I've gotten experience with a small company or, this part of the stack. I want to try something new, and I feel like this is a good place to do that. That would be a great answer.
I love that.
Real quick, what are some common things that people say in an interview that they should not be saying on why they're leaving their job, besides the obvious of like, oh, my boss sucks or anything stupid like that?
Anything that like indicates that you cannot resolve conflict or communicate within a team, I think is going to be a red flag to people. So like if you have an issue with a coworker, your feelings are totally valid, and I don't want to negate those. However, potential employers don't want to see that from like they don't want to hear it. So like, it's not that your feelings aren't valid and all of that. It's that you want to showcase the things that you can bring to a new team, and good communication and collaboration skills are like one of the biggest things they're looking for. So often you'll get a question of like, tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a team member and how did you resolve it? And the biggest thing is just about like, okay, my answer to that is always like, look, I've had differing opinions, especially working across cultures with different communication styles. And the best way to do it is to approach them and say, hey, I would love to have a chat about how we work together. Like, can I schedule some time on our calendar for us to privately go over that? That way you both walk in there knowing that like, this is what you're going to talk about, and it's a safe space, hopefully. And then I think the biggest thing is like, listen to their point of view, then, tell them your point of view and see if you can come to an agreement, and hopefully you can. But that's a great way to approach that question, because like, what's the alternative? Like, I wonder what people say to that question of like, tell me about a conflict you had and what did you do about it? It's like a lot of people I feel like don't have a proper,
took it outside.
What are you supposed to say?
I beat him
New York. You went straight New York, right?
Hey, there's actually a question. Cyrus coming with the heat right now. So some interviews ask for your social media accounts. Why are they asking for that? And our buddy Dan, our third unicorn, Dan, who couldn't make it today, is answering us from a vacation right now. So Dan, thank you. But go ahead, Emma. Thoughts on that?
So I've never been asked for my social medias ever. I will sometimes add them.
Everyone knows
But sometimes I will add them if my social media is tech oriented. I wouldn't add them if they're personal, first of all. And if they're asking for your personal social media, hey, do they not know how to Google your name? First of all, like they should be able to find that. Come on. But also, why do they care about your personal life? They shouldn't. I think the only reason you should ever add a social media is if it is business oriented, and you can tell them that. I would tell someone that if they were like, give me your private Instagram, I'd be like, why? My personal life is my personal life. I keep a work-life balance. Like, nope. But I'll give you my Twitter where I do post tech content. And then what about reviewing content and how do you represent the brand? I'm kind of a fire hydrant where I just like spew out crap and I'm really bad. That's how I literally got my start, because I was just like fire hydranting out content and not rereading it or not thinking. And honestly, it worked. But like looking back on it, I definitely that was not good. I think the thing is like, if you want to grow a social media following that represents your brand, and actually that's how you can get speaking engagements. That's how you can find jobs, is through social media. Actually, that's how I got this job. I think the biggest thing is like what things do you want people, if someone was asked like how they would represent you in 5 words, what are the words that you want them to represent you as? But don't make your content just like the quote unquote like marketing tweets. Like those are not authentic. They're not, it doesn't feel like it's a real person. Like you still need to be yourself and share what you're comfortable sharing. But like, yeah, keep those in mind. And I think like for me, my biggest like a social media branding word was like authenticity. And that means that sometimes like shit hits the fan and it's not good. And I'm honest about that. But for you, it might be, I don't know, consistency. Maybe you have a goal to like post a blog every day. That could be one of your brands. What's the word I'm looking for?
You're doing great. I think, is it your personal brand?
No, but like there are words that you use when you're developing like a
content strategy.
No, it's like,
okay. I'm struggling too, I guess. Phone a friend.
What are they called? They're like words that describe personal. Yeah, kind of. They're like, you would have like 3 words.
Core tenet.
3 words. 6 letters.
A brand identity. I think it's an identity.
There we go. Mantra.
It's something like that.
Yeah.
But all companies typically have these words when they are trying to come up with like
keywords.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is. Thanks, Jake. Finally.
No, it was Michael. I read his.
Oh,
thanks,
gotcha.
Michael.
Hey,
English is hard for me.
English is very hard, especially for me too. So I want to end on this topic, and we could go another hour on this topic, but I want to. The goal for this is to highlight people who are doing unicorn-like things in the market, and I think you're doing that, especially from mental awareness. I think from being open, being honest, being vulnerable. What are your thoughts? So we can keep it to interview burnout, but we can talk about building brand and content creation. You know, I saw one of your tweets a while ago about how you like go really hard and you burn out. And you said, I know that's not feasible. So again, I know we can talk about this for an hour, but maybe talk about just interview burnout, being aware, taking time for yourself, all that.
See, this was tricky because many people who are interviewing don't have the luxury of taking breaks. They're not interviewing for fun. They're interviewing because they got fired or laid off, or, you know, they need a second job to support their family. And those situations are extremely stressful. So unfortunately, I can't speak to those people directly because I've never been in this kind of a situation. I've always been in a situation where I had the luxury of taking breaks from interviewing and being selective with the people that or the companies I want to interview with. And if you can take breaks and reflect on the process, I think that's great. If you don't have that ability, I think it still warrants, like, you need to feel the emotions that you feel when a process is unsuccessful, because you can still learn things from it, and take them as learning opportunities. Like, evaluate what areas you felt like you struggled with or weren't confident in, and focus your studying on those. And just be aware that, like, you're not alone. This is really fucking hard. And, you know, I like to think of things as like, it just wasn't the right opportunity for me. Like, I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gone through all the shit that I had gone through the past couple of years. So
I love that so much. Well, listen, we could probably be here for another hour with the questions coming in. Again, Emma, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. I didn't know if you want to answer a few more, but for me, I mean, I think you absolutely crushed it, and we appreciate you a ton. And you can go and give yourself a mental break now after.
Yeah, thanks. It's Eurovision tonight. It's the second day of Eurovision semifinals. And for those of you in the US who don't know what Eurovision is, it's basically American Idol times 1,000 because it's so much better. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to support Iceland tonight. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, y'all, thank you again for tuning in to Unicorn Finders this morning. We appreciate it. Emma, you're a rock star. Keep crushing it overseas, and hopefully I'll see you in Stockholm eventually.
Yeah, let me know.
I will. All right.
Truly a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.